welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am your host, Jessica. I'm here with my co-host. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jen.
And once again, I am so thrilled to welcome back Josh Malerman, who every single time I see that you're coming out with a book, Josh, I'm like on top of it immediately. I'm like, where's Josh's publicist's name again? Let's get this happening. So
thank you for
thrilled.
that. Yes, I'm thrilled too, and I am pretty darn sure this is the first interview I'm doing for Watching Evil Dead. So I'm pretty sure of that. So that's usually that's something for me to be a little nervous about. Like when, there are themes in inspection, there are themes in I'm looking at the rack incidents around the house, spin a black yarn. There are themes that are kind of like harder, or maybe I haven't even investigated myself. But this being a nonfiction book, like I feel like I've been talking in this way for 12 years or something.
And it's really great. I mean, I can't even describe it. I think we just have to talk about it. I don't know if you feel differently, Jen.
No, it is such a lovely read, and I love how it's like about one night and an entire career at the same time. It's just like really beautifully structured too.
Thank you. For anyone listening, if you hear the title "Watching Evil Dead," please don't mistake that for me having done any research. My gosh, I'm not I'm not that kind of guy. This is not film analysis. It's also not a writer's guide, in terms of like do this, or take these 12 steps, But it does end up being something of a maybe like if your friend's a writer or if you two are friends, it being a guide in terms of maybe I would hope like some sort of shot in the arm, rather than like a how-to kind of thing. And yeah, just to give it in a nutshell, Allison and I, for listeners, Allison and I were brand new to each other at the time. We just got married, by the way, 2 weeks ago. Allison and I got married.
Congratulations! Can I say that I am the first podcast host to officially, myself and Jen, to officially congratulate you two on your, oh my goodness, that is amazing news.
Yeah, that's if I appeared a little MIA recently, that's why. We were up north for weeks and we got married and it was amazing at her place. But way back when we were only a couple months into dating, she told me she had not seen The Evil Dead. And in the early days, as you both know, or any listener would know, sometimes the movies you show your friend land, and sometimes they don't. And you're like all excited to show them like Raising Arizona, and they're like, this isn't funny. And you're like, oh, wait, what happened, right? So with this one, it turned out that her cousin heard that she hadn't seen it, and he was like, come over. He was dating someone at the time. What happened in the course of this night was I had just recently got the book deal for Bird Box. And so there were all these sort of mammoth tapestries in the room with us. There was New Love. There was The End of Love, her cousin and Rose, who he was dating at the time. They were just at each other's throats. They were standing at the head of a career in horror. There was watching a movie, a debut movie by a guy who was standing at the head of his own career in horror. There was art. There was some nervousness, doubt. There was excitement. So you would think like, oh, it was just a night in a living room, 4 people watching a movie, but why can't a night like that be as significant as any in your life, right? And typically that's where those kind of nights are, actually, right? It's not like you met your boyfriend at the top of the Empire State Building, right? You met like it's a very simple setting or something, And so that is essentially what the book is about for the audience here, is more of the experience of all these tapestries in the room and seeing a horror movie for the first time and excitedly showing someone a movie you're out of your mind excited to show them.
Something that you capture really well, I think, is the vulnerability that's kind of like wrapped up in showing somebody a movie that you love. And, that sounds really melodramatic, but there is this like vulnerability of like, I hope you love this thing I love, and here you go, but no pressure, but also please love it,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then it's almost like if they don't love those kind of things, well, hopefully you have a million other things in common, because then it's okay. It's okay that you're not a fan of, The Shining or whatever it is. Like, yeah, I don't know, like I can't wrap my head around that you're not, but okay, because we have these other things, right? Yeah, fortunately, Allison absolutely loved Evil Dead, and she also she does like effects work of her own, like and I call her the woman of a thousand faces because she does like a million different, and she does props for our readings and this and that. So this was right up her alley because The Evil Dead is one of the most like inventive, vivid, colorful, still to this day, horror movies ever made.
I would even say for myself, it's what got me into horror
Oh,
movies.
wow.
Yeah, I took a film theory class because film theory was my minor in college. And film theory was all centered, the way that my old professor taught it, was centered in horror, which makes a lot of sense if you know about some film theory. He alternately did a foreign film theory class, but I was very happy to get the horror one, which is funny because I was afraid of everything growing up, as I think a lot of horror fans were. But I didn't see the Evil Dead trilogy in class yet. I had the class the next semester and I saw it again. The first time I saw it was with a bunch of friends in their dorm room, and we watched it like you did. We watched the first one and the second one, and it just sort of lit my mind on fire.
Oh
Number
yeah.
one, how inventive it was, and how you had all of these at the time, like these unknown people, making these movies, all of Sam Raimi's signature shots. It was just really incredible. And then, we watched the second one, which we can talk about a little bit because, that's how it goes. You and Allison, you sit down with Kinnicky and Rose, who are the other couple, and you're reacting to the movie and reacting to each other and reacting to each other's reactions, which is just, man, I can't say enough about how compelling it was, just the way that you write it so beautifully. But, something about those movies just burst into
Yes.
flames. I mean, it was wonderful. And and then later we watched Army of Darkness. But it really is, like the beginning. You're watching the beginning and the blooming of an artist in Sam Raimi. And then of course I had to go back and find out everything I could about him. And then I'm like, oh, he was involved in the Hercules and Xena
Yeah.
world. I liked that
Yeah.
too,
I know. I know.
yeah.
And it wasn't he, or didn't the Coen brothers play a part in editing or some? So like that's one of the things about and we have a book launch coming up where one of the first things I'm going to tell that audience is I am not an expert on this. Like I look at me right now. I'm like, weren't the Coen brothers kind of like, did they do something here? Like I don't even know. You know what I mean? It's like I almost just want to remain just a fan of it. And I just wanted to that's as far into it as I want to go, And like, but it is interesting because a lot of people that have read the book will write me and say that this book is making me want to like make something of my own, right? And that's I don't know if you can get a higher compliment than that. And I then think to myself, well, it's no coincidence that the center of that living room was Evil Dead. Because if there's one thing that if you watch that make you want to go make something, it's that movie. So it's almost like the Troika dolls, the movie, the book, us reading, like us now or whatever. Yeah. It's like that movie, like they say the Velvet Underground, anyone that heard them started a band, And it feels that way about the Evil Dead. Anyone who's seen that, at the right age, you're like, all right, I'm gonna go do something like this. Whatever that is.
I feel like what they capture is just like that. I feel like it almost has to do with how you talk about idealism and realism not being opposites, you know? Like when you watch that movie or even listen to the album that you were just talking about, it seems like both impossible but very accessible at the same time. You're like, oh, they had nothing, but somehow they turned nothing into like so much more than the sum of all of its parts, you know? And that makes it seem like this is miraculous, but also like maybe something that we can do.
Yeah, no, this like whereas the Blair Witch Project well, that one is actually, well, whereas the Blair Witch Project, when someone tells you the Blair Witch Project was a tiny budget, you're not like, no. You're like, yeah, we know, you can tell. But that's part of like the charm and that's part of the amazingness of it. This isn't like that. When you hear that this one had like zero budget, you're like, how is that freaking possible? Like what they did, the creativity, Jessica, what you were just saying about his signature shots. And you also get this sense, and I think that Jen, this is how that miracle that you're talking about happened. You get a sense that it was a team effort. You just do. You get a sense that it was a band at work. Like there's a drummer, there's a singer, there's a songwriter, a guitarist, a second rhythm. You just it doesn't. Whereas Sam Raimi's obviously a visionary or a singular artist, there's just the energy of an entire band in that movie.
And you can see it once you see it, you can see how that creativity grew throughout his career. But again, when you talk about watching it with a small group of friends and just sort of experiencing it, I remember when my friend was like, oh, and this shot, which is the one we're all familiar with, I think it was done on a skateboard, and
Yeah.
it's like you get that sense of like when you were a kid, if you were a kid who liked to create, and I see it in my own kids, and I remember doing it myself with like my cousins, where you'd want to put on a play or something for your parents, and your parents were always like, oh God, now we have to sit and do this thing. And you would work so hard. You would try to find every possible way to make the sound effects. You were putting things on like pipe cleaner strings,
Yeah.
like it was really just an effort for you and your friends or your cousins to sort of create something wonderful, and to see something like that come to fruition, it did tap into something just kind of deep inside that was like, yeah, I used to want to do things like this. What happened to that?
Well, I talk about this in this book. That sounds like a funny thing to say. I can't believe I just said that out loud. I talk about it in my book. But no, but for real, I do. Something that Allison taught me, which is that there is no age to the artist, and I think that I foolishly used to, prior to meeting her, I just naturally assumed like there's an example in there about Paul McCartney where I'm like, Allison in my very, very early days, I was like, man, he still sounds good. And she's like, why wouldn't he? And I couldn't understand. I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, he's like 70 now or whatever, right? And she was like, yeah, but like he's an artist and continually at work. Why wouldn't he only just get better? And I was like, okay, you're right. You're right. Why wouldn't he just get better? And I ever since then I've seen this entirely different. I was just reading about, I think her name's Grandma Moses, like a New England painter. Like Michigan people don't know who that is, I don't think. And I saw like some ad that she did her first painting when she was like 75 and then did 1,500 paintings. Okay, she's every bit the artist is the person that the savant, Rimbaud, who started at 15 or whatever. There's no timetable, there's no age of an artist, and there's no really, in a way, there's no release date of like Moby Dick. Moby Dick, hey, it came out today as far as you're concerned. If you haven't read it, go read it now. And that's true of like any book or any work of art out there. I think once you start seeing it that way, then you lose the sort of the sense of guilt, the sense of like, oh, I have to do this now. That's sort of like an anxious thing. And you actually say to yourself, no, I can start this period of my life or just even this singular work of art right now. I make this and I'm every bit the artist as any artist who ever lived.
And I think too, in what you're talking about there's a certain amount of like non-judgment that like is involved there, like because that comes up too when Allison reveals that like she hasn't seen the movie. It's like you're not judging her for that, like you're like no judgment, whatever. People come to things in their own time, and that's how art works too. And I think that that's something like Jessica, when you're talking about your kids' art, and when we talk about like Sam Raimi and crew making art, like their main audience is also their self first before they did it for anybody else. And I think that I kind of lost like the question in there, but
No, you're totally right though. That lack of judgment. And again, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know how I would have talked about this at age 23. I just don't know. But I do know that by the time we watched this movie and by the time obviously now writing the book, I'm where you're talking, like 100%. Like I mean, zero, not only zero judgment. If someone tells me that they haven't seen Evil Dead now, I'm like, oh my God, do you have a treat for yourself? I'm like, I'm almost jealous. Like,
Yeah, and I think it sort of comes with like the anticipation that one day I'm going to show it to my kids, and
oh yeah.
you know, but I think that what I'm tapping into here and sort of what we talk about a lot in the book is something going back to what you started with, how we relate to people over the media that we love. And there are a few movies that, like, when my husband and I started dating, I feel like if I like, it was like, this is the window of time that I have to show this to you. And, like we go back and it sort of changed his opinions on certain things too. Like, oh, he might have been like, no, I'm not gonna watch that. But then, his new girlfriend who he wanted to impress was like, watch this stupid movie with me. And he's like, this is a good movie. But I
Yeah.
do think, with that, and also just like, hey, now we're going to introduce this thing to like, to our friends or our kids. We'd recently shown our kids Goonies and they're obsessed with it.
Oh, that's
That
amazing.
was an experience. We recently showed them Back to the Future. There's just something sort of about that. And then you can have these conversations about how these things were made, how they, the kids didn't see the pirate ship until that shot, or, well, they didn't anticipate making two other movies, but people really liked Back to the Future. And I think my kids who are burgeoning horror fans, I think that when we do watch the movies together, it'll be a huge conversation because there's the first one and you talk about you all go back and you watch the second one, which I love the way that you put it. I don't want to spoil it too much for people, but instead of looking at it so much as like a reboot or a remake, it's its own thing. And then there's Army of Darkness, which I can quote from start to finish.
Yeah.
Did that at a party once with my husband sitting next to me. But there is something about just experiencing all of these things and then getting to experience it again through the eyes of somebody else.
Yeah, there's a pivotal moment in watching it with Dad where I realized that Allison, where I think I even say like I'm not showing Allison this movie tonight, she's showing me, and that may sound like it's something to say. No, 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 no. It was like I hadn't seen what she was seeing in it on my own, and I'm definitely gonna bring that up. Oh, and at the book launch, they're screening the movie. This is really exciting. This is crazy exciting. So as you know. They're from around where they're from like they're from like 4 miles from where I'm sitting right now. Sam Raimi and Bruce and no, everyone. The theater that they premiered the movie at is called the Redford. That's about 7 miles that way. That's where we're doing the book launch. And that's where we're screening the movie. So we are watching the movie at the theater that it premiered at, right? And I'm gonna make a point to tell the audience to make, even if it's your sixth time, like I mean, maybe it was my fifth time or fourth time when I saw that. I don't know what it was, but that was my first. That feels like my first time now because there was something about someone I was with who I value their artistic like worldview or whatever it is so much, and to see it through her eyes, and she was seeing it as almost this like Hieronymus Bosch, this like Grand Guignol, this like you know colorful rather than scary. I've heard stories of like Sam Raimi and his brothers like shooting like Three Stooges ish videos in like cemeteries. And if you think about it, isn't that exactly the hand in Evil Dead 2? And isn't it almost Charlie Chaplin-esque? And you know what I mean? Yeah.
That, and he has, I think in every, is he the one who in his movies there's a credit for a fake Shemp, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right. So this is a guy who obviously, and it's not, I don't want to say just comedy because sometimes when you say like horror comedy or that kind of thing, it sort of undercuts it. You know what I mean? Even that's freaky. I mean, it's like, and if I saw that as a kid, I didn't. I saw it more like in my like later teens. But if I saw that as like a 10-year-old, I would have been like scared, scared. And I don't know about number two, but no, I still would have been freaked out by moments of number two. But yeah, so I don't know if I would say comedy, but the director does have that love for that, for the almost for like the silent film era. And I think that's what's that guy's name? Like Harold Lloyd or whatever, the guy that hangs from the clock in the silent era, right? It's almost like there's Sam Raimi is bringing that idea of comedy, the Charlie Chaplin, the early silent film, like body language comedy to Bruce Campbell, really. And you also see it in what's the Western? The Quick and the Dead.
Yes. Yeah. The same, yeah, zooming camera shots and everything in that.
Yes, yes, totally.
And you really highlight, I guess, it's like the same reason why it's good to have other people read your writing, right? Because when you return to something over and over again, you start to just see what you expect to see. And that other set of eyes can like alert you to all those things that you've sort of like tuned out over time. And so to transition, I'm curious about like what it's like spending so much time, like the course of writing a book, sitting with the memory of this one night, right? Because like scientists, neuroscientists say that like every time we access a memory, we change it a little bit or hold it in a
Yeah,
new light or learn something
yeah, yeah.
new. Did the book transform how you viewed that night?
God, that is such a good question. I don't know how to answer that. I know this. I had one incredible source with I had Allison. And like just for example, like I couldn't remember at first the order of movie. I knew number one was not first, but then I assumed we watched the sequel second, and she's like, no, 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 we watched the remake, and I'm like, oh, you're right. And so in the early days of putting the book together, it was like, okay, okay, what else? And I would talk to her about things she said, and she read it and da da da. But Rose and Kaneki had to be mostly by memory and that kind of thing. What was the subject we talked about? The moment that really stands out is when Rose tells me that that bookseller didn't like me. Like it's the weirdest. It was one of the weirdest moments of my life because we just arrived at their house to watch this movie. I'm all excited. I had met Rose at Barnes and Noble, and her and this guy bookseller and out of nowhere, she's like, "Yeah, that guy never liked you." And I'm like, "Oh shit, man. Okay, where is this night going? Oh no!" But I don't know how I found the fortitude to just be like, "Zoop, let's move on," you know. But like, Kaneki was upset. He's like, "Why are you bringing that up right now?" Right? That is very vivid to me. That moment, most of the scenes with me and Kaneki out by the garbage cans, they shouldn't be vivid for all the smoke in the air, but they are. The things we talked about and how he said that amazing thing about how every relationship, like every whoever you're with now, that means your every previous relationship he was saying failed, right? So he was saying that like so he's in this relationship with Rose. If he dated six women prior to that, he's 0 for 6 in terms of it being long lasting or lasting forever, whatever, right? That whole thing was super interesting to me too. And there were a lot of moments like that. I remember talking specifically with him about idealism is not the opposite of realism, and writing that letter to that the Lawrence Erdang, the thesaurus guy. So did it change how I feel about the night? No, it's always been this like just this precious thing to me. Like for years, I have any writer friends come over and would be in my office that I'm in right now, and they'd be like, "What are you working on?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm working on the Incidents Around the House or Goblin or Daphne," and I'll be like, "But I have this idea. I have this is nonfiction idea." And anytime I told them that idea, they're like, "Oh, you gotta write that one, man." And I'm like, I know, but I just like, oh, when am I gonna write a nonfiction book? And this to transition a tiny bit, just let me just say this real fast. Like, oh my God, to Del Rey for putting this out. Like, what? Like, okay. So I sent it to my agent, and I was thinking like Kristen's gonna be like, dude, what is this, Josh? But she's also gonna be like, okay, maybe we can find a home for it. But as she's reading it, as I'm at my own place waiting to see what she thinks, I start thinking to myself, what? Kristen likes books and she loves writing and art. Like maybe she will like this. And then Kristen called, and she did. And I was like, okay, okay. But then she warned me, okay, we're gonna go to Del Rey, but be ready. This might be out of their wheelhouse. This is a very unique thing, da da da, And I'm like, no, I know. She sends to Del Rey, and the same thought crossed my mind again. I'm like, but wait, Del Rey and Trisha, the head editor, Del Rey, they are book people and creative people. Like maybe they will like this. And they did. So I just want to throw that out there that it's pretty awesome that Del Rey would put out a book that is not straight nonfiction in terms of like analysis or reader's guide or writer guide. That is nonfiction in a more like experiential way. To me, that's a pretty bold thing for them to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was thrilled to see it. And, like I said, I think before we started recording, just again, everything about the title for this book to who it was written by I mean, the cover, just everything was like, this is something I have to read. And I think, it's like a real treasure, just like showing the love of your life, the Evil Dead movies for the first time ever.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna put it on because we have tonight, we have our first like rehearsal for the reading. As you know, Jessica, we do the theatrical readings for every book. And this one's no different. There's gonna be live score from my musician friends. We have a couch on stage that there's gonna be four of us sitting on the couch. I'm playing myself, Allison's playing herself. Okay. And we have our first rehearsal tonight. The release is in 6 days, but meanwhile, we are our first. But I'm gonna go throw the movie on after this and just have it like blasting in the other room while I figure out what scene we're gonna do. I think I want the scene. I want definitely has to be a scene where all four characters are talking as we're all up there. But I think I do want it to be that moment of like, oh, Allison is showing me this. I think because I would want the audience who are about to see the movie, either for the first time or again, I would want them to be like kind of in that headspace. Like even if I've already seen it, maybe I'm seeing it for the first time, that kind of thing. And I think that scene or that idea kind of lends itself to that or something. Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it's sort of like is so central to so many of the things you talk about in the book because like making art is also kind of about how you see things, and seeing things like as if they were new every time you encounter them is like a really great way, I think, to like keep that creative spirit alive. Um, Something else that kind of comes up a lot, um, that I thought was really interesting, just given how you were talking about how the book doesn't really fit into any sort of like boxes very comfortably. There's a part in the book where you are sort of worried about like brand and should artists or writers brand themselves, and it is important to have a consistent brand and all that. Was this book sort of like, I don't know, consciously testing that boundary, do you think? Because it is just so
Well,
shape-shifty and
okay. I said to Allison yesterday, I was like, man, there's a pattern going on here. So Bird Box comes out, and then me, Allison, and a bunch of friends made the craziest, and it's talked about in Watching Evil Dead, the craziest potty humor movie you can freaking imagine. And it's freaking brilliant and hilarious. Allison is absolutely genius in it. But for that to be the first thing we did on the heels of like your first published book, Big Five House, talking at the MoMA, all these press agents, and then this is what you go and do next. Same thing here. Incidents around the house. The movie's already been filmed. The book is doing, oh my gosh, well for us. And I don't really even talk normally in these terms or whatever, but it's impossible not to see this. It's doing really, really well for everyone involved. And then this is the book that you followed up with? Like instead of a like some, you've got everyone saying, or a lot of people saying that Incidents Around the House is a really truly scary book. And you're following up with a nonfiction drunk and stoned account one, you know what I mean? Like this is so I am starting to see a pattern there where I don't think that it's a screw you to success. I don't think that it's any sort of self-sabotage. I do think that there might be some sort of intentional reinvention each time. I do. I think there may be, or conscious sort of like, not to compare myself to Bowie or Dylan, but I'm thinking of sort of artists who are super emblematic of that, of like changing mightily from like album to album or that kind of thing. And I really, really, really respect those kind of artists. I just think that not just because it's like brave and bold, but it's also like the minute you do it, it's then part of you. So now when you look at Dylan's whole discography, that all makes sense as him. But at the time, it had to be like really weird when he goes into the Born Again phase. At that time, it had to be really weird when Self-Portrait comes out, that kind of thing. And so I am always thinking in terms of body of work rather than the individual like work itself. And sometimes that can bite me a little bit, as we were talking in terms of like branding or that kind of thing. Sometimes it can, like, like, oh, maybe people did want or were excited for like another scary thing to follow this up. Well, that's the next one. That's 2026. You know what I mean?
And I can't wait to like to jump scare your publisher and be like, guess what? I want to talk to Josh again about the next book. But I look forward to it. I really, really do. It's really just very exciting.
No, it's amazing for me that when I see an email from you about this, because we've done this a few times now, it's a really, really exciting thing for me. I'm like, hey, Jessica wants to talk about watching Evil Dead. All right, like it's really cool. I
Yeah.
think one thing we haven't talked about now, and part of the reason is because it almost feels like a spoiler, but it's funny to even think that there could be a spoiler in watching Evil Dead, but is that whole what does the artist deserve question? And that if there is a spine or a plot to the book beyond just like watching a series of movies, that like wrestling with that question, what does the artist deserve? That would be like sort of the spine of the book. That is the through line. And that's something that even I mean, I remember, of course, distinctly having the thoughts at the time when Bird Box was about to come out and the night of watching Evil Dead. But I'm still having them while I'm writing this book. You know what I mean? Like 12 years later, when I'm writing about that night, I'm still those questions are still there. And it's such like an interesting thing, especially in this social media age where you see people either super grateful for anything or maybe not, whatever it is, that's okay. I'm not saying one way is right or the other, but I am saying that it's almost impossible to ignore, because like you hear of every good thing that happens to another writer or maybe every bad thing that happens to another writer, and so you start thinking to yourself like, oh my God, like what do we all deserve, right? I don't want to spoil it because it sounds like a strange thing to spoil, but I don't want to answer that right now because that's essentially what the book is all leading up to, is at least my answer to that question.
Thank you so much for all of this. I love talking to you. I wish I could somehow go and see your opening because I bet you it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you're not that far away.
One of these days, I will do it. Thank you so much. Please read Watching Evil Dead: Unearthing the Radiant Artist Within. I can't say enough about it. It's gorgeous. Even if you're not necessarily a horror fan or you don't think you're a horror fan, but you're an artist and you're just sort of like feeling like you're not really sure where your spark is, where your spark went, or you think you might have a spark. Just read it. It is so lovely. Thank you.
Oh, wow, thank you.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.